Leadership has completely evolved from titles and roles to impact and influence. And when we own who we are and understand who we are and step into that, I believe that we can show up to lead and influence in a beautiful way.
Who doesn't want to be a great leader? A leader who's calm under pressure, insightful, respected, well-liked. But what does it take to become a great leader? Hey, I'm Boo, and welcome to my podcast. The Few Leadership Podcast defines great leadership and what great leadership looks like. And I've found some of the world's best leaders or experts in the field of leadership to help you accelerate your leadership journey so you can be an ace at the game of leadership. If you're ready to rethink everything you know about leadership, if you're excited about accelerating your leadership journey, let's strap in and ignite your leadership potential. Welcome back, leaders, aspiring, established, wistful, successful, struggling. It's a challenge to lead in today's modern world, which is why this podcast exists. Remember, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you forgot to review, you forgot to leave a like, please just do that whilst you're listening, or maybe at the end, to make sure that we keep getting these incredible thought leaders onto the show to help your journey. I mean, at the end, that's what we're here for, is to help you be a better leader. Philosophically, why do we love leaders? Because leaders have a profound effect on those around them that are a center of gravity. The better we lead, the better impact we leave on the world. So today we're going to talk a little bit about you as a leader. It's all well and good to want great leaders around you, but if we don't set the benchmark, if we are not equipped with the skills to lead ourselves, well, really, what's the point? So we're going to go down a little bit of a journey on self-leadership. Corliss Rassyle, thank you so much for coming on The Few with me today. What do you think the biggest challenge is for leaders, the modern era leader?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I'm thrilled to be here. And secondly, I think that the biggest challenge is for them to actually own who they are, see who they are, show up as the best that they can be, because from my perspective, leadership has completely evolved from titles and roles to impact and influence. And when we own who we are and understand who we are and step into that, I believe that we can show up to lead and influence in a beautiful way.
Do we ever truly know ourselves? I like this metaphor to think of an iPhone, right? And when you look at an iPhone, on the inside of the iPhone, no one really knows how it works, how it connects the dots, the operating system. It's like a user interface. And sometimes I feel humans are a little bit like that as well. Like there's a lot going on the inside that we don't see, that we don't understand. I'm sure the iPhone doesn't even know how it works, the way in which we engage in it. So it sounds kind of fairly obvious that it starts with you, but what is it about us that gets in the way of our personal leadership journeys?
Well, that's the whole conversation here, and that's the whole journey. And I think that what we have to recognize is that there's layers to us, and there's always something that we're going to be discovering, a way of growing and evolving. As a matter of fact, from my perspective, you actually discover purpose as you do, because as you grow and evolve into who you are, you show up to influence and impact in a different way. And that creates purpose in your life, and you can do it all intentionally. So the whole idea here is to recognize that as a human being, you have many layers. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It was called The Blind Side. It was with Sandra Bullock and Tim McGraw. And you know that scene where the football player, I can't remember his name now, he's getting dropped off at the school and he's going off to college, and she says, okay, I'm going, goodbye now. And she goes and she gets in the car and she sits there kind of with her guard up, like she doesn't want to become emotional about leaving him at the school. And, the young football player, what was his name again? I can't remember his name. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. He looked at Tim McGraw, the dad, and he said, why does she do that? And he said, it's because she's an onion. We have to peel her back to understand it one layer at a time. And that's the journey of leadership and understanding who we are to step into who we want to be, is to really grow and evolve and adapt and understand ourselves and go past that first layer to the next layer. And every time we do that, we're able to show up in a different way for other people and lead differently. This is why leadership has to begin within, and it has to begin with us.
I guess you're talking about self-awareness here, right?
Yes.
But when it comes to self-awareness, often we are our own worst observers of our behaviors. Right? We have these blind spots, these biases, they shape our beliefs shape our behaviors. So when you look at somebody, let me rephrase that. When someone looks at themselves and they have the intention of being self-aware, what is it about us that makes that difficult?
Well, I think that we're biased, like you said. And I think what the best thing to do, and this is one thing that I learned to do, I actually learned it from my mom, who is not a highly educated person or anything, but she certainly knows a lot about life and about people. And she would always say, remove
Moms
yourself.
Moms are good that way, right?
Oh, yeah. They sure are. They sure are. So she would say, I remember going to her with a problem. And she said, sweetheart, what would you tell your own daughter to do? And as soon as she said that to me, I was able to remove myself and immediately get clarity because I was no longer in it. I wasn't emotionally tied to it. I wasn't biased. I was literally looking outside and the answer was so clear because I know what I would tell my own daughter to do. So it's like taking that bird's eye view. A lot of times when we're in it, our subconscious programming, our own limits, our belief systems, they stop us from seeing, the forest through the trees. This is why we need conversations like this, is to recognize that we're not alone, but also that there is a solution. If you step outside of it and look from the outside in, a lot of times you can see clearer, who you are, who you want to be, and then that gives you the direction of who you want to show up as.
It's interesting though, isn't it? I mean, my journey has always been a curious one, and try to understand about myself. I know more about myself. I still don't understand why I get upset about certain things. I still don't understand why some things put me in a bad mood. And I certainly have been in circles with lots of self-aware people that also seem to exhibit some pretty common human traits, like getting angry, being dismissive, failing to be engaged. I've worked with some incredible yogis who are honestly outside the studio complete assholes. So there must be something about a journey of self-awareness that is balancing this inherent humanness. I mean, Corliss, I would be surprised if you managed to go through an entire week without, having something about yourself that troubled yourself. Why does that happen? And what can we do to be, I guess, gentle on ourselves and try and mitigate? I just think there's some things about me that I just cannot change. Like that are just, they're not even cognitive. They're just so deeply entrenched in my psyche that I feel like I've just had to come to terms with that. Maybe that journey of self-awareness is what lands you at finally your genuine strengths and your genuine weaknesses rather than your perceived. So I guess the question is, to be self-aware, does that mean that you become this perfect, wonderful person?
Gosh, no. I don't think the journey ever lands there. And I do think that that's an expectation that would be unrealistic for any of us. I think it's to fall in love with the journey of discovering who you are. And you said something really critical in this whole process, is to be very curious. And instead of judging yourself, say, why do I think like that? Why did I react that way? Why am I behaving that way? Why am I processing this way? Because everything is about a belief. Even when we think, oh, we can't change, that's a belief. You could shift that belief and say, yes, I can change. And I'm enjoying the journey of discovering who I am. And I'm curious about why I think that way. And where does that even come from? And does that belief serve me any longer? Because if the belief doesn't serve you any longer, you can just simply say, I'm choosing a new belief. The easiest and the simplest way to understand what beliefs are, I was taught to by my mentor, Jack Canfield. And Jack said, a belief is simply a thought you've accepted as truth. So if you want to believe something different, just think a different thought and accept it. And that becomes your belief. That's why each of us is so differently, and why you can believe one thing, I can believe one thing, the person across the room can believe something different. It's because we all have these thoughts. We adapt them and accept them and believe them to be true. And that's why they become our beliefs. So it's a journey to understand that. But I think the thing that you said earlier about just getting really curious, giving yourself grace, enjoying the journey, and really discovering who you are, like falling in love with the idea of like, who am I really? And where did that even come from? And is that a belief that serves me now?
I just want to dig a little bit deeper around something you just said about if you think differently or you think a different belief, you'll start to absorb that new belief. How important is practice and action though? So, I think some people get a little bit disappointed with the positive psychology movement and the positive affirmations, and you go out and each day it's like, hey, you're amazing. And then you come home and be like, I was not amazing today. Someone was mean to me today. Where does action and living your thoughts come into this?
I think you just nailed my entire journey in a few sentences about how frustrated I've been that I'm doing all the things. I'm doing all the things and it's still not happening and I'm still not loving who I am. And, I still acted that way. So here's the thing. It's embodiment. So it's not just practice your affirmations and be like, I'm this, I'm that, although you will change how you feel when you practice actually affirming and making self-declarations that build you up and tear you down. But then it's a matter of embodying that and catching yourself and having this heightened consciousness and self-awareness as you go about your day, building it into your life. It's just who I am. I really am successful. I really am enough. I really am. And building that into your life on a daily basis, I really am an influencer. I really am a leader. And starting to actually think and embody it that way, not just think it, is actually the trick. This is what I've learned. And that is the practice. That is what's required. It's not just getting up in the morning and giving yourself a pep talk. It's actually embodying it and living it in each and every day in everything that you do. And every time you screw up and you're like, oh, there's my human again. There's me being a human being, but I'm choosing to rise up from this. And that's no longer who I am. That doesn't serve me.
With all of this, there's an element of expectation management, I think, in terms of whether you journey on a physical fitness journey, whether you journey on an emotional journey. How would you advise people to kind of set an expectation? So you want to implement a behavioral change. You want to be a little bit different. I feel like sometimes people wake up and it's with that burst of energy and motivation. It's like, yeah, I've just become self-aware and today's going to be a great day. How do you manage expectation and I guess find joy in the small and bring awareness to the small moments? Is there any kind of advice you have on that?
Oh, I call that a reset. So I'll share with you a little story here around where this was discovered. But you're asking me the right question. And I mean, we don't really know each other, but I want you to know that this has been my journey. This has been my journey right from the beginning. And it's been the hardest thing because I am an ambitious person. I have high expectations of myself. It was really hard for me to accept who I was, and I'm always striving to be something better and do something better and have that expectation of myself, which was virtually impossible. It put me on a hamster wheel of like, I'd just about get there and I'd never get there. And then I'd try again. And it's like I was setting myself up for constant disappointment. So I want to share an affirmation, a self-declaration. Let's call it that instead of an affirmation that I created for myself originally. And I've shared it with lots of people. And I hope it helps you as well. And I really hope you'll embody it. The affirmation goes like this. I love who I am as I become who I want to be. So it's about really getting present to who I am now as I'm becoming. It's not about always being out there. It actually lives in me right now. And I love who I am as I become who I want to be was the mantra that I had for a long, long time to help me kind of embody this and to live it, not just think it, but actually live it. Now, coming back to what you had asked about, how do you do that throughout the day? It's just that curiosity throughout the day of like, oh, there it is again. So getting present to, I behave that way. Where did that come from? That's interesting. So instead of judging yourself, it's more like, I'm kind of interested to know why I'm still acting this way or why I'm still thinking this way. When COVID had first happened, the pandemic had kept people apart, right? And my parents are elderly. And it was the very first time that they got to come over to my house. So it had been a couple of years, like it was a long time. And my parents who are elderly were compromised. So of course we didn't want to put them at any health risk. And my parents come over that night and we're just so happy. So I just want to set the scene for you. I'm in my home, my partner's there, the kids are downstairs, they're playing, the fireplace is going, the puppy's laying by it. We're playing cards, my parents are there, we're laughing, we're having this great time. And I have my phone sitting beside me. And the phone sitting beside me, it goes off, it dings, and I can see from the subject just the very quick glimpse that someone's not happy with me. And I look at it and I'm like, what just happened there? So I look at my phone, get curious, and I start getting engaged in this conversation. This person saying all of these things to me. I feel this need to defend myself. And I start going down this rabbit hole of like, it's taken me. So instead of me leading my life, life is leading me, which is the name of my book, right? So I am completely entrenched in this whole thing. And I pulled into it. And then instinctively, I closed my eyes just for a second, 2 seconds, actually. I just closed my eyes and I took a breath. And when I opened my eyes, I thought to myself, what's good here right now? I just completely was like, I'm leaving that. What's good here right now? And I started very consciously seeing my parents who are alive and well. They're sitting here. I'm in my house. I looked at my fridge and I thought there's food in the fridge. I could hear the children downstairs. It was like I shifted in 2 seconds. I called it a reset because it was like a 2-second reset of like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going there. And it's like that heightened awareness of myself that just that one conversation could pull me that direction and steal the joy of my life. Or I could take back my power and say, I lead here. What am I choosing to focus on? So the same thing applies as you go about living your life and managing your expectations and becoming your best version. Every time you notice it, just notice it and then interrupt it and just give yourself a quick check and a quick reset and say, I'm not going there. And as you develop that, it becomes a habit to actually think that way and you shift your belief system. And this is where you start to think differently.
If you're enjoying the show, I'd just like to ask of you a little favor. We're on a mission here to ignite the world's leadership potential. We need to reach out to as many leaders as we possibly can. So if you're enjoying the show, I just ask you to leave a review, to subscribe, to help introduce this podcast to other leaders to join you on your journey to flawless leadership. We're going to head back to the episode now. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today. Please remember, let's ignite a movement of flawless leaders. Subscribe, leave a review. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, I love it. I call it don't pull the trigger. You know, like every time something happens that, to me, that potentially engages you. And I learned this going through a divorce and the 11 years afterwards, right? Which I think is probably the most triggering experience for any human, male, female, doesn't matter who you are, right? It's deep. It's a situation no one got set out to get into. There's a lot of people in your ears. Everyone wants to get involved. People excited. And I just have this mantra in my mind is the minute I feel and I'm not a ragey person, by the way, I'm very relaxed, but there's these moments where you receive something and it's like, all right, I felt the blood boil. I felt the red mist kick in.
Yeah.
And to me, I just have this moment of like, don't pull the trigger. Just don't, it's your choice. Don't let it get there. And for you to go down into the primal structures of the brain. And I read this great book. It was called The Power of Forgiveness. And the irony of forgiveness is you forgive others for yourself, not for them, right? And part of that is like, it's the only person that's going to actually get hurt from engaging in this dialogue is going to be me. Yeah, the other person will also, it's going to be a no-win situation for anyone. But I think leadership is knowing that you're the one that can stop this. You're the one that can, we're certainly not seeing this on the world stage at the moment, but you can actually sit there and go, you know what? We're in a situation here, whether it's in my team, whether it's a client, where something emotional's happened and someone's angry. So there's two ways this goes. We lean into it, and no one ever wins a war, even when you win. Or I take the high ground here and try and bring this back to a cognitive dialogue where we can bring reason and logic to the conversation. What have you seen in terms of some because you obviously get to coach and come across a lot of leaders, right? What do you see in leaders when you walk away from a session and you're kind of hit by them and go, wow, like that's an impressive person? And what are you seeing in them for you to I certainly see it. I coaching leaders and being in a room and it's like everything that comes out of their mouth is like, damn, that's really good. And that's
gold.
Yeah. Like you just see it, right? And then you see other leaders that just can't find the words and can't seem to, they're kind of in the, you okay? They're more in the emotional space of leadership rather than the impactful side of leadership. Have you had similar experiences yourself working with leaders?
Oh, yes. It comes to mind, actually, the most recent speaking engagement that I did. Their leader is just an exceptional leader. I watched them care about their people, take the time. They were in the conversation with them. They genuinely cared, even when they were communicating with me about what they wanted me to deliver and what the challenges were. They were so in tune with what was going on for them. And really, that has to come from curiosity. They were curious enough to really look within their people, have those conversations, and to be like, this is what the struggle is, and this is what we want to help them with. And then that was communicated to me so that I would kind of execute and support that. So I think that leaders that are really great are the ones that they are authentic, they're vulnerable enough, and they're in tune with themselves enough to understand what the people that are following them actually feel. So it's like, that's why leadership has to begin with you, because if I understand this within myself, like as a leader, then when someone else is sharing that with me and that's what their struggle is, I can recognize that. I know what that feels like. And now I can come up with, how did I come through that? And how can I best use what I know to support them to grow and evolve into who they can be? So it's people first. The leaders who are exceptional are people first.
Do you think that some leaders are just born with it and other leaders need development? Everyone has a different kind of style of approaching the world. What are your thoughts on that in terms of born leaders versus developed leaders versus maybe even controversially born followers?
Interesting. So there's two thoughts here. The first one is that there's children on the playground at school that are leading. So is it natural? I mean, yes, we know the kids at school, they just maybe don't know their power, and they're, bossing kids around or organizing everything. I mean, I think, yes, there is some natural leadership ability there.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Sorry, I don't mean to step in. I just want to make sure I capture a thought. So, some, even in that environment though, some kids are leading through coercion and other kids are leading through inspiration, right?
Right. And that a lot comes from who's leading them at home, right? Who's leading them at home? Because however they're being led at home is now going with them everywhere that they are. See, that's how I see leadership. Leadership is about impact and influence, and we are influencing in our homes first. I was standing on a stage and I said, if you do not believe that you are a leader, I want to ask you to think about this differently. And I want to ask you, who influenced you first in your life? I want you to think back. And of course, everybody said, well, my parents, right? So if you look at it that you were impacted by the people that were in your home, your parents, then you are now doing that as well. And everywhere that person goes, they're taking that influence with them and using it, whether it be for good or not good, depending on what you believe in to be good or bad. But that's the thing. We have to really own that. I held Lead Conference Canada. So I launched a national event. I was the host, Lead Conference Canada. And I stood at the front of the stage and I shared a story about a woman who contacted me and said, I wish you all the best with your conference. If you ever have one that's called Follow, I will come. And I was like, you're joking, right? And she's like, no, I'm totally not a leader. I'm a follower. So if you ever have one called Follow, I will come. So I had this conversation with her. Of course, I laughed. I thought that was so funny because from my perspective, that's crazy. And I shared with her about
everyone wants to be a leader, right?
Right. And she's like, oh, no, I'm following. And I said, but I want to ask you to reframe this just a little bit, because if you look up the definition of lead in the Webster's dictionary, it is an initiative and an action, an example to follow. That's what it means in the dictionary. So that means we're all an example to follow. It's an initiative and an action. It's an action word. So this is why it comes down to, it can be as simple as making a choice. Who do I want to be and how can I show up and influence in the most positive way possible? And am I in tune with myself? And do I understand myself enough? Have I developed myself enough to be able to show up and be the example that I want to follow? This is how we have to see ourselves. It's a complete reframe. But when we really own that, we impact in our homes, our careers, our communities, everywhere we are. And we have to understand that when you own that power that you have, it's impacting far beyond anything that any of us can see. It's going with every person that we've impacted. I remember being like 21 years old it was my very first time being exposed to anything personal growth and development. I went to this conference and this woman was on the stage. She looked like a movie star. She wasn't, but to me at 21 years old, she looked like a movie star. She was getting decorated with all this recognition and people were saying such kind words about her. And after she came off the stage, she was visiting with people like a true leader, giving each of them some attention. And she even gave attention to me. And she talked with me for a little bit. And of course, I was very enthusiastic and just in awe of her. And anyway, I remember she reached and she put both of her hands on my shoulders and she looked right into my eyes and she said, I'm going to keep my eye on you. You're going to do great things. And still to this day, it's 30 some years later, it still actually makes me a little emotional. It was so heartfelt and so meaningful that a woman would see me as someone that could do something significant. You know, so we all have that power. Every single one of us, the words that we say, how we show up, who we're being, as we are, we're leading and we're an initiative and an action and an example to follow.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? And I think you said it right from at the start, where leadership is transitioning rapidly out of hierarchy and into making an impact. And I think it's really important to frame the way I conceptualize leadership is people leadership moments. There's the big getting things done part of leadership, because let's be honest, you got to get things done. And I think a lot of people think that's what leadership in business is leading people to KPIs. But I think, leading your children to be the best is a impactful leadership as well. And that leading in the moment about making decisions. And to the point, there are some incredible people that are in the hierarchy are lifelong followers. Particularly, I just love executive assistants, right? I think the executive assistant is the unsung hero because they've got the big picture and they actually get things done and they exert an inordinate amount of influence. How would you go about empowering, connecting people with that, to connect someone and say, hey, look, you might, within the hierarchy of this organization, I think some people are clever. They understand that, hey, I don't need to be in the highly visible leadership role. I can actually get more done down here. And some people are very good at that, at exerting, and I think they're experts. They're just so good at what they do, they don't need it. But if I was listening to this podcast and I felt frustrated that I wasn't powering up the organization, what would you tell me in terms of, I have the power to lead right now? How would I become aware of that? What could I do?
I think you have to see yourself as a part of a bigger picture. I think a lot of people fall into that trap, and we have to see ourselves as a part of something bigger. And okay, so there's two things here. I have a friend who is exactly that executive assistant. She ran that school. There's like 1,000 students at that school. She ran the whole thing, from being the nurse of the child that came to the front that was like not well. And she could organize that, and every single teacher and admin, and keep the principal on task and schedule everything. I mean, she was incredible. But she didn't see herself going anywhere there. She didn't see herself as an intricate part of it. And in a deep conversation her and I had, I said, can't you see that if you don't do what you're doing, you can't see what you're doing for other people? You're just looking at what's in your immediate circle. What if you were to look at the impact that you're having by supporting that child that came to the front that doesn't have a mom that's there for them? What if you showed them kindness and caring? What if that teacher that needed support that was new and struggling, what if you saw like the impact that you are? We all play an important role. And as we're striving, to become and to advance and all of those things that you've described, and you're frustrated with that, right now, get present to the fact of you're a part of something bigger. You're a part of something important, and we each play a role in that. My partner is a firefighter, and he, there was this terrible car accident. It was a big tragedy that happened in our community, and he was in it, and I knew he was because he's a captain. So I was like, oh boy, I wonder how he's doing with this whole thing. And anyway, he came back, and I said to him, did they live? And he said, I'm actually not sure. And I said, oh, what do you mean you're not sure? And he said, well, they were alive when I handed them to the ambulance. And that started a conversation about, he does his job of getting them out of the car wreck. And then he passes them off to the ambulance. And then the ambulance takes them to the hospital, where then the doctors and nurses take over. You see what I mean? We're each a part of something significant, and we have to own that. That's leadership as well, is like owning that we're all a part of something bigger and more important. So as we're advancing and striving for our goals and becoming more and doing more and achieving more and all those things, to get present, to bring it back to what you asked me in the beginning, to get present to the fact that it's important now, because even a simple kind word, a small act, something that you're doing can impact somebody. And you have to know that in your heart of hearts. You have to know that everything you are and who you are matters, and you have to show up in that way, and it's going to impact forever. It is.
I think you've opened an interesting thought line here. We do a lot of work with our afterburner business in many sectors, and the challenge with engagement and purpose is people generally don't hop out of that part of the picture to get the big picture. My uncle was a rescue helicopter pilot for the police and was often a first responder and arrived first to a car wreck. And he eventually left because he said, I just can't go and be the first person to arrive at a car wreck anymore. But one of the things that he said that meant the most to him was years later or months later, when someone who was in an accident reached out and said, can I meet the pilot? Can I meet the crew that came in? And just how infrequently that happened. And I sort of said to him, I said, well, did you ever ask to meet people, or was it a passive kind of just wait until you're asked? And I think in terms of leadership, there's kind of nothing wrong with asking people to be involved in that big picture, right? And say, well, what actually happened at the end of the piece that I was a part of, the other 6 links in the chain, what kind of happened? And I think some companies do that really well, where they bring that big picture and they involve everyone and say all the way through, and this was the result that happened, and people feel engaged. So from a personal leadership perspective, how important is it for you to take accountability of your own big picture rather than wait for the big picture to materialize?
It's the top priority. It's, from my perspective, it is 100%. You have to own it. You have to see it. You have to know, and you have to believe it in your whole heart that I am a part of something bigger. And we're all here energetically. We're all influencing. I mean, you're in Australia. I'm in Canada. So we're having a conversation, right? You're in Australia?
No, I'm actually in the US. I live in Park
you're
City,
in the US. Okay, you said you're from Australia.
Yeah.
Okay. You said you're from Australia. So, but
yeah.
Either
we don't have
way,
bison back in Australia.
Either way,
be a kangaroo. Yeah.
Oh, our impact and our influence right now is bigger and greater than ever. We have social media. We have these platforms where we can be impacting people, whether it's Australia, the US, Canada, Europe, it doesn't matter. We are all in this space now where we can choose even how much we influence and how we impact by what we post on social, like how we respond and how we act. This is why the choice is, who am I, who I really want to be, and how can I show up as that? And do it in a way that's going to make you proud of who you are. And as you do that, you're not only creating purpose in your life on purpose, but you're actually leading and influencing and impacting in a way that makes you proud of yourself. This isn't about appeasing other people. That's not what personal leadership is. Personal leadership is about, I know I am becoming the best version of myself, and I am using that in a way to impact in the best way possible, knowing that who I am makes a difference and that I'm part of something bigger.
So, Corliss, we're getting to the end of our window here on the podcast. I'd love for you to just share one thing, the next day thing, right? What is one thing I can listen to this podcast, give myself a nice rest, sleep on it, wake up in the morning? What is the first thing I could do to transform into, or not even transform, to kick off that first step of a lifelong journey of self-leadership?
Examine the beliefs that you currently hold about yourself, and then ask yourself, is this belief serving me and where or who I want to be as I move forward in my life?
And I guess that's the key, is what I believe and what is the consequence of that belief. And is the consequence is that the destination I want or not? Corliss, thanks so much. How can everyone that's listened to this podcast and been inspired by you actually find you?
Go to my website. And actually right now I have a free offer there right now. I'm so excited about it. I just posted it. It's called the 22 life situations that require a reset. And I help you with how to actually overcome and reset in the moment. So it's at corliss.ca.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show, everyone. We do have all of the links to Corliss down in the show notes. If you've listening to this in the car, make sure you just keep the podcast channel open and have a look. Corliss, thank you so much for your insights today and being very generous. I'm so grateful to have you on the show. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.